Welcome. In today's session, I'm going to be covering the Webdocs Forms Management overview. Today we'll be covering a couple different things here today. So we're going to be walking through the forms management process here and how we can build different forms, how we can deploy different forms, and then also how we can manage different forms from the workflow standpoint. So we have a forms management workflow approvals that a form can go through, and also we can integrate to the back end if it becomes a document in that process. And then we'll also talk about different ways that we can connect different systems. If it's the Webdocs system for secure storage, databases, we can also use Active Directory connectors, file system connectors, and we also have our Automate bot integration capability. So that's an add-on package that you can do. So if you need to do back-end automation from the data that's captured from the documents or forms, we can do that from the process. And then we'll also touch on at the end the Webdocs secure repository. So where all the information is stored at the end of the process. With audit and version control, so you can look up that information during the process. Just a really quick here, so what we'll cover in the live demonstration for a little bit more detail here is we're going to cover how our web-based drag and drop designer works inside of our interface. We'll also talk about how we can plug it into different ERP or line of business systems with our database connectors and file export and import processes in Active Directory. So we can dynamically or retrieve data and then pre-populate forms with that information that you might want to be able to process. And then we'll also spend some time on how do we collect signatures in documents and how forms can be routed through the workflow processes. And then also some very important areas as well is enforce business rules inside of the form. So there's different ways that we can set up the forms to guide users during that process. So two areas that we're going to cover here today, starting with the forms creation process. So I'll cover some of the forms creation process and then also the workflow creation process, how we can all do that from the drag and drop designer process interface. All right, let's get into the live demonstration here. So so from the interface standpoint, all web browser enabled. So we have no client that needs to be installed. If I log in as a user to the system, you will see that a user of the system has their own interface as well. So depending on security that they have to be able to access documents in the system, they're going to be able to get a different interface dependent on how they're logging in. So as a user, Tom logged in here. As a user here, I can do approvals on forms. I can review forms inside of my workflow or my tasks, what we call it. So this would be the interface for them. Now, if I'm a designer and I have designer capabilities, you'll see if I log in as my designer, you'll see that I have a different interface. I still have my tasks and all that stuff over here because I'm still a user of the system, but I also have capability to create new forms and new applications inside of here. So we have that capability directly in the interface. Now, from a form standpoint, you can think of any form that you have as paper or a process that you can create a form that needs to have interaction from internal users, external users. We can do that directly in the form process here. So we have different kinds of applications that you can do inside of here to be able to process. Now, from a demonstration standpoint, I'm going to show you a couple different forms here from that standpoint. So it could be just a simple form process that you want to do. So it could be like a purchase order, or it could be a check request form or something like that, right? Or it could be a checklist that gets passed around from person to person. But forms can be set up inside here. So you can see this I'll put this into test mode so you can sort of see this one here, but we can create these different forms with different sections and required fields and grids and patterns and stuff inside of here. So they can fill in this information. And then you can also secure different sections down inside of here as well. It's not just data collection, it's also document collection. So a very powerful tool for collecting data, but also documents from this process. And this can be done from, PCs. It could be done if they're coming from a mobile device. This will actually attach to the camera on their device, so they can actually do that process there during the fill out of the form. You'll see in my test interface here, when we test a form, we can actually test it on every single environment as well. So we can test it so you can see what it looks like inside of a, like more of a tablet or a laptop or a desktop or a laptop, or we can actually see what it looks like on a tablet device as well. And you'll see how it changed that interface. So it interacts with the device in the correct responsive design process. So if I want to see what it looks like on a more of a smartphone capability, we can see that in here as well. So it allows you to not only see that, but also interact with the form to get the true experience of what a user would be experiencing during that process. Now, to create these forms that I just showed, a form like that, we can create new forms, or if I want to be able to edit this form, you'll see that we have all web browser enabled creation client here. So we can take all of our tools here inside of our palette over here, and we can drag these different options in here. So if I want to put, say I wanted to put a drop-down box up here up on top, I can drag the drop-down box control over here and then name the control, and then if I click on the control, I can configure that control as well. So there's no programming that needs to be done to be able to configure these different functions of the form directly in our interface. Now you could configure help text, hint text. We can put options in here from the drop-down menu in the form, or if I want to connect to a database, I can actually do more of a web service call to that database. So we can actually hit an ODBC data connection to be able to pull that information in. So there's a couple different options there from a form standpoint on where you collect that information. Now you'll see here there's a couple options. We do have signature control capabilities inside of here. So if you want to be able to do wet signatures and stuff inside of forms, you can do that through the Forms Designer as well. So very, very powerful tool to be able to create different sections and different kinds of form processes. Now, built into our the Webdocs Forms Management System as well, we do have flow capability, so workflow capability. So I can actually edit so I'll edit one of these so you can sort of see this. But I can take a form and create a process around that. So that another palette is up here on top. So if there's different forms I want to be able to interact with, I can drag and drop those in here. And then also the same way as the form, I can configure these different areas to be authenticated users that have to be able to access the form, or I can also do anonymous users as well. So we can set these up in different ways inside of here. It could be a multiple step process, it could be a single step process, but we can do those in different ways inside of here. Now, let me back up here one second here. I'm going to show you another option here as well. So inside of here, from a workflow standpoint, workflows are very powerful features of a form, right? Because they need to be able to flow around from sales manager, VP, email to the client, back and forth kind of a feel. So if you click on each of these steps, like I said before, you can set up different securities and privileges. But you also might have steps inside of here. So if I go click on the VP step here, you might have a step where the VP doesn't need to get involved every single time inside the process. But if it's equal to or greater than that $10,000 limit that's coming through, they might need to be able to be in that approval process. So we can set up preconditions inside of here with no programming to be able to trigger into these different events and different steps inside of the workflow. We also can set up approval rejection processes. We can set up task email notifications. We can also set up and configure escalation processes. So an escalation process would be if a certain condition is met, right? So if it's not performed maybe within a certain amount of time, or a certain day or something like that it needs to get completed, we can then re-notify someone or even reassign a task and send notifications to them. So we can actually put condition is approaching. So if they know they have like 2 days to approve it, we might after 1 day set a condition to say, hey, we need to notify them that they still need to do approval and do some work on the form before it's processed. So we do have different ways to be able to do that from a workflow standpoint and form process. Now, from a form process, here's another example of a form. We use this a lot in our onboarding process, so our front end and back end automation processes. So we can use forms like this to be able to set up and configure. So this one here is more of a tabular form that has some sections on it from that standpoint. So we can configure these forms in all different ways at that point. Now, from a form standpoint, I'll put this one in test mode, like I was talking about signature capture and stuff. So a lot of times we might have to, fill out information inside of here. We might have to tab through something and basically walk a user through on what needs to be collected and the data that needs to be collected. So we can actually, put those requests and those sections inside the form and then route that form around through different levels of approval, either to get user ID and password-based signatures, or in this case, a web-based signature. And then in this process here, we have the capability to, give, the last step of the workflow might be to give IT the review process so they can make any updates or changes or add any other files and then process that information to the line of business system. Or in this case, we have this connected to our RPA automation tool to be able to do the user provisioning and do the user setups on those systems with some of our automation bot tasks that we created. So there's some different ways to be able to do that from a form standpoint. Now, after the form leaves our system, so there's a couple different things that the form can do, right? So we could actually just put it into a directory. We can put it into another system, but built into the Webdocs Forms Management System is our Webdocs Document Management System. So we can log in with a user ID and password to be able to get to those archived documents. So say 6 months later, I need to go and look for certain information, and I need to go and look for a certain employee's information. So we can actually type their employee number into the system, and then we can get to that information here as well. So I can come in here and see that form with the audit and version control as it was filled out from that process here. So all that information is inside of here. So that's our Webdocs module here. And that the Webdocs module can be used for any supporting documents to that as well, that a form might have to corral. Now for sharing forms, the last piece here for sharing forms, we do have a share option. The share option is really nice because it gives you different options that we have inside the system. So if you want to do an iframe or a raw link or pop-up window, we give you all that information here and you can copy and paste that into your application. Or we also do have what we call spaces and portals. So portal access, so if you want to be able to secure a form down or have an internal portal for forms, we do have a way to be able to provide access through the portals and the forms. One of the things I did not talk about in the designer before I started, when we start forms processes, it's really nice to be able to share items with other people. So we can actually have shared items in here that different designers might be sharing with different individuals, and also templates to set standardizations up. So we can also set standardization templates up, meaning that we can have like the header, footer, logos, and all that good stuff on there that people start from to get, so you're making sure that you have some kind of consistency to the process. All right, that concludes our high-level overview of the Webdocs Forms Management System. Thank you.